Hey, we're going to have a short video on some historical terms. Now, I've got another video I'm going to put together, and that video is going to have the words in it and try to put it in connecting it with some other terminology too. But for now, I'm just going to focus on some visuals because the visuals sometimes are easier than to read the words. So this is what we're going to start with. A couple words we're going to write down. And when you write them on your paper, spread them out a little bit so you have room because we're going to add some stuff here. And the first one's a really hard word to say. I'll write it down. It's corroborate. Now, corroborate. Say it over and over again. Corroborate. Just as it reads, you got to almost say every single syllable. And since this is a vocab word, I'm going to put this, and I call them kapow boxes. Kapow. And I always take those kapow boxes and I add a little color to them because I want them to stand off on my page. Now, you've got a colored pencil. I've got a marker this time around. And it's okay, just as long as it's yellow, because I always do my vocab words in yellow or in gold because I want them to stand out on the page. Now get really consistent with your colors when you add color to something. So when you look at it, you know every time you see a specific color, it means a specific thing. So every time you see yellow on some of my doodle notes or gold, you're going to know it's a vocab word. And so it's easier to spot. Okay. The next word we're going to put on here is the word called context. And context isn't a very difficult word to say, but it's kind of a hard word to understand. And we will work on that in just a couple minutes here. But I want to put my kapow box on there. Add a little color to it. Don't get crazy with it, just a little bit of color so it stands out on my page. You can cover the whole thing if you want to. I'm just doing just the edges to save some time here to make it stand out so people can see it. And then I'm going to go on to my next word. And that word is the word bias. That's bias. That's a short word. It's a really important word when we're talking about history and looking at information that we get stuff from. And as I explain what bias is later, you'll probably have a better idea why it's so important. Add a little bit of my color to my kapow box. I'm going to go down here to my next word. And this term is called point of view. Now look where I'm at. I'm not going to go all the way to the bottom. I'm going to go about the halfway mark. And if you needed to, you could literally take this paper, fold it over like this, and then bring it back down. And you can start right at the bottom of that line, so you give yourself plenty of room for explanations under the words, okay? In fact, I'd recommend you just do that. Just go ahead and fold over your paper so you know it's in half, and you come back down here, and then you can make sure you have plenty of room in your notes. So here's the next term. It's point of view. And I got a feeling a lot of you are going to pick up on this one a lot faster because the words help explain the term in ways that most of us really already probably understand. I'm going to go ahead and add a little color because once again, it's a vocab word. We got to have our yellow in there. So we got to make it stand out. It's a kapow box. And it's not just the color that I use vocab for. It's the way I draw the kapow box. Because every time you see a box that looks like that, you know that that's also a vocab word. So you're using not just color but shapes to help trigger things in your mind. Here's another word. Plausible. And in our vocab, we'll use the word plausible, and we'll also say the word implausible. Now, why is it important to know implausible? Well, it's really just the opposite of plausible. So if you can remember that, I don't have to write down both terms or draw both terms. I just have to make sure you understand what one of them means. And then you could just go the opposite when you put the I am in the middle, in the beginning of it. And here's the last term we're going to cover on this particular sheet. It's reliable. And also, when I talk about reliable, I got to talk about the opposite, because that's a word that'll pop up that could come up in your vocab words. It's unreliable. Anytime you have the word un in front of something, you're just undoing the word that you had behind it. So if something's reliable and you put the word un, that means you are no longer reliable. So it's kind of like saying not. All right, now let's go through some of these terms. I'm going to give you a picture of them. Now, as I do that, I'll explain it to you, but I'm going to give you the written definitions on a different paper and different video. So don't worry about that. We're going to focus on just this one here. Corroborate, very first thing. Now, corroborate really just means support. And when I talk about support, I'm talking about evidence, facts, information. We're trying to support a story. If you were accused of a crime, it'd be like an alibi. And if the cops say, hey, where were you at? And you give them a story and say, I was right here at my friend's house playing cards on Tuesday night. And they say, is there anybody there that can corroborate your story? And you're going to say, yeah, my friend Charlie was there. He'll hold my story up. And my friend Johnny was there. He'll tell you exactly what I was doing too. So right now you've got Johnny and you got Charlie, and they're your support. They're backing you up. In this case, they'd be your alibi. I want to make sure that it looks like they're not hanging from something. I put a ground underneath them. So that's where your support is. That's how you corroborate something. Now, context is a whole different thing. I want you to think of a photo. And we're going to draw a little photo box real quick here. Nothing too fancy. We'll put the white edges because the old photos always had the white edges, like the Polaroids and stuff like that. A lot of you are too young to remember Polaroid. And if you've got Steve out there and you want to know why Steve got so sunburnt, how could he possibly get so sunburnt? Well, you look at the context of his day. We're going to look at a photograph, and that photograph is going to give us clues about what he was doing that day that would have got him so burnt. And if I just start looking at the things a little bit floating around here, are you starting to get a better idea, a better picture of where he might have been, what he might have been doing that day? Do I have to keep going? Well, I will. That's right. He was at the beach. So if I want to know and I want to do an investigation, and I want to get figured out what all the clues I've got going on here, I can start looking at this and say, you know what? That dude was at the beach. I can look at the background of a situation, or start looking at all the clues necessary to better understand the environment, or how something is being done, or how it's being said, or how it's being used. And that helps me better understand the topic, which in this case was Steve. Okay, so that's corroborate, that's context. I hope those pictures help you out a little bit. The next term is actually a lot easier than it looks, and I'm going to use a scale to help me better explain it. And if you don't know what a scale is, I want you to think about when you go to the grocery store and you have to weigh out how heavy something is to figure out the price. Now it's all that's done at the counter, the checkout counter now. But it used to be when you went back and bought a watermelon or you bought a cantaloupe or you bought grapes, you had to weigh it. So you knew how much you're getting. Well, bias is when you take two things and you give one of them more weight. Instead of looking at something fairly, you're going to give something a little more favoritism, and you're going to tip the scales in an unfair way. So it's not equal, it is unfair. And sometimes when we look at facts like history, we can get really biased because we don't like something or we do like something before we walk into it. You know, you can show a video of a comedy show, and if it's in black and white, some people won't like that show just because there's no color in it. They're biased. Or maybe they won't listen to a certain kind of music. They think the music's bad because it's not their kind of music. It's not something they already like already. So they won't judge it fairly. And that's what sometimes what we do. And a lot of times bias comes into play when we talk about politics, or we talk about race, or we talk about people, whether they're boys or girls or whatever the case is. Sometimes we can get biased and say, oh, blonde people, they don't know anything. They're not very smart. Well, that's pretty biased and it's unfair. But that is exactly what happens sometimes when people judge history. Okay, so our next term. Looks like we're doing pretty good here. I'm going to try to get through this. Point of view. This is a lot easier than you think it is. Point of view is nothing more than how you see something, your perspective. So if I got a giant number written on the ground, this guy sees a 9. And this person sees a 6. Are they wrong? Are they right? Well, they're both right. Or maybe they're both wrong, depending on what this number is. But from their perspective, their point of view, from the place they're standing, they both see something different. That's what point of view is all about. Okay, our next word. Now, this is going to be tougher because a lot of you are really going to struggle with what I'm talking about here. But if you bear with me, I promise it'll make sense. I think that a lot of people have seen the Disney movie Pinocchio. And every time Pinocchio lied, his nose got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why he could never lie. He was a bad liar. You can always see right through it. That's Pinocchio, stick figure Pinocchio. So if something's plausible, what I'm going to do is this. You ever see something that says like no smoking or no eating or drinking or not being barefoot in the store? They got the sign on there. They put a slash through it and it's a red mark. Well, I'm drawing the opposite of plausible, which is believable. And I'm putting a slash through it. Which is plausible is the opposite of unbelievable. Okay. There's probably better pictures out there, but that's what you got. Okay, and the last term we're going to cover is the term reliable. Reliable is something that's dependable, something you can count on. And if they used to have this exercise where you had to show how much you trusted somebody. And we don't do it very much because people, I guess, we're dropping people. But if you're standing back here behind somebody and your friend started to fall backward, would you be there to catch them? Reliable is something you can depend on, something you can count on, something that's going to be there. Um, I know sometimes we have reliable family members or reliable friends, or um, when we talk about history, we're really talking about reliable information. Can you count on this to be believable? Sometimes these terms work together. Then you got the opposite, which is unreliable, which is if this guy was falling back and he turned around and walked away, that'd make him pretty unreliable. You wouldn't trust him anymore, right? Okay. So let's quick review. Corroborate. It's about supporting your story with other factors that'll help make your story sound better. Context is understanding what happened in the bigger picture. And this is where you lose clues around you to better understand what happened. Bias is sometimes if you walk into something and you already have your mind made up, or you're being unfair. That's what bias is. Point of view, your perspective from what you it's how you see things from the angle you're standing. Plausible is something that's believable. The opposite of unbelievable, which is what Pinocchio was because his nose grew all the time. And reliable is something you can count on that you know is going to be there in case you start to fall, or in case you need to really, really count on that information being accurate and true. So that's it. If you have any questions, I hope this answered a lot of stuff for you. And that's it. Thank you.